Astrology in the astrological ages is an ancient science dating back thousands of years ago. It appears in many cultures, but as with most ancient wisdom, much of it was lost or has been concealed from the public. The true nature of our reality is one of the most guarded secrets. The ruling elite have hoarded this knowledge all for themselves. Secret societies, and those driven by greed and power, have used this form of ancient knowledge to their advantage in wars and global manipulation for a very long time now. Millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. J.P. Morgan. From ancient Greece to ancient Mesopotamia, many great minds throughout the ages have practiced astrology, and for good reason. Our constellations are a celestial clock. In Western astrology, we are transitioning from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. The Vedic doctrine tells us what Western astrology philosophies do, and correlates with the cycles described by ancient Native American wisdom as well. The ancient Greeks also appear to have believed in an ascending and descending cycles of ages. The Greek poet Hesiod inserted that a fifth age, called the Age of Heroes, or a new golden age between the Bronze and the Iron Age, was going to take place. Now, let's take a closer look at some very important clues to when this will all begin. The Vedic doctrine tells us that at the end of the Kali Yuga cycle, there will be a time of darkness, also described in the Mahabharata. A time when mental capabilities reach their lowest point and moral virtue is stripped from the earth. When the world's soul is full of blackness and corruption, only a small fraction of virtue remains. Men turn to wickedness, disease, anger, anguish of fear, and scarcity dominate. These descriptions accurately reflect our modern society's progression. As we move through modern history, this past age is coming to an end, marked by a time when global tensions have never been so high. Now, let's take a look at what the Bible says about when this will all take place.
The Cobran Bible, Egyptian Coptic writings. This particular part of the Cobran is speaking about the destroyer, but it also explains to you what happens in the skies during different ages. When ages pass, certain laws operate upon the stars and the heavens. Their ways change. There is movement and restlessness. They are no longer constant, and a great light appears redly in the skies.
Now, the red light that's going to appear in the skies is clearly speaking about the destroyer. But we can all see that within the past few weeks, there's a lot of things happening right above our head. As a matter of fact, right now, we have a planetary alignment. 5 planets aligned in order right above us. I talk about this in greater detail in my alignment video, but let's see what the Bible says. Genesis 1:14. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." Now, we spoke about this in my last video, right? But the ages of the nations are seen in these signs, and it will be of great service to us to pay attention. The ancient Sumerians and the crescent moon were very knowledgeable of these signs. The well-renowned Mayan calendar, where most people in the world take a look at, right? They were very knowledgeable of these signs as well. And that will be our preliminary focus for today, right? We're going to talk about several different ages since the inception of America. But in order to know the ending, you have to go back to the beginning. The doctrine of discovery, also known as the age of discovery or the age of exploration, part of the early modern period and largely overlapping with the Age of Sail, was a period from approximately the 15th century to the 17th century in European history, during which seafaring Europeans explored, colonized, and conquered regions across the globe, right? So this is during the time of Columbus's travels. This was an age that was bestowed upon the whole world. This is the reason he even set sail, right? This is from the Ancient Origins webpage, and is speaking about the Hopi Native Americans, which are regarded to be the oldest ancient Americans in existence. Let's read what they said. These prophecies began to be made public shortly before the mid-20th century. The Hopi are an aggregation of clans that came together at the center point in northern Arizona during the course of their migrations. Because they are not a monolithic tribe, the sources of their prophecies are fragmentary and multifarious. Part of the lack of narrative clarity also has to do with the secretive nature of the Hopi. So they wanted to keep these prophecies to themselves. They didn't want to expose these prophecies nationwide, worldwide, right? Because they were oral tradition of their ancestors. These isolated, sedentary farmers living in unpretentious pueblos, basically stone apartment buildings, on the high desert of the American Southwest have looked into the future from their kivas, or subterranean communal prayer chambers, and have seen some rather disturbing scenarios. Many times, they simply do not wish to share these visions with the outside world. Considering the history of exploitation and genocide of Native Americans in general, this is understandable. And we're going to go back to the doctrine of discovery, because that is what they're referring to. They're referring to the doctrine of discovery, Dum Diversas, the Romanus Pontifex, and Inter Caetera, right? This was an age that happened, and people don't understand the ages. But we're going to break it down just a little bit. Now we'll hear a direct quote. We have teachings and prophecies informing us that we must be alert for the signs and omens which will come about to give us courage and strength to stand on our beliefs. Blood will flow. Our hair and our clothing will be scattered upon the earth. Nature will speak to us with its mighty breath of wind. There will be earthquakes and floods causing great disasters, changes in the seasons and in the weather, disappearance of wildlife, and famine in different forms. There will be gradual corruption and confusion among the leaders and the people all over the world, and wars will come about like powerful winds. And all of this has been planned from the beginning of creation. This sounds very similar to what Christ said in Matthew 24, doesn't it? And what are these omens? Where do omens come from? What is an omen? We may get into that a little bit later, but we know the Hopi prophecy says that European invaders will take their land. The age of discovery. The extensive overseas exploration with the Portuguese and Spanish at the forefront, later joined by the Dutch, English, and French, emerged as a powerful factor in European culture, most notably the European colonization of the Americas. It also marks an increased adoption of colonialism as a government policy in several European states. As such, it is sometimes synonymous with the first wave of European colonization. European exploration outside the Mediterranean started with the maritime expeditions of Portugal to the Canary Islands in 1336, and later with the Portuguese discoveries of the Atlantic archipelagos of Madeira and Azores, the coast of West Africa, in 1434. Excuse my pronunciation. And the establishment of the sea route to India in 1498 by Vasco da Gama. which initiated the Portuguese maritime and trade presence in Kerala and the Indian Ocean. Now I know this is a lot, but we're going to simplify it, right? The age of discovery is the reason why America exists today. And that brings us into 3 documents, Dum Diversas being the first, Inter Caetera, and Romanus Pontifex. With this trifold law system that was set up, all of these foreign lands that would not turn over to Christianity were up for grabs. This is why we're now seeing in 2023 the Pope attempting to disconnect himself from the doctrine of discovery, because he understands we're in a new age, and a new age of judgment. Let's take a peek into the doctrine of discovery and see if there's anything inside of it that is worthy of this judgment that is here. This is known as the Papal Bull Dum Diversas, June 18, 1452. Pope Nicholas V issued the Papal Bull Dum Diversas on June 18, 1452. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens, Muslims, and pagans and any other unbelievers to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. Yes, this is the Papal Bull that initiated the transatlantic slave trade. The same Pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5th, 1455 to the same Alfonso. As a follow-up to the Dum Diversas, it extended to the Catholic nations of Europe dominion over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery, along with sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands. It encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and the New World. Oh yes, they enslaved the aboriginals, the inhabitants of the New World as well. Everybody didn't come from Africa. Interesting, huh? We are now about to read a precept out of Columbus' own mouth. Thursday 11th, October 1492, and we know that's the same year of Dum Diversas. Sometimes Columbus refers to himself in the third person, steered west-southwest. They saw petrels and a green bulrush near the ship. The men of the caravel Pinta saw a cane and a stick and took on board another small stick that appeared to have been worked with iron, and a piece of cane and other vegetation originating on land, and a small plank. With these signs, everyone breathed more easily and cheered up. And that's probably because they saw vegetation, right? At 2 hours after midnight, the land appeared, from which they were about 2 leagues distant. They hauled down all the sails and kept only the trio, which is the main sail, without bonnets, and jogged on and off, passing time until daylight Friday, when they reached an islet of the Lucayas, which was called Guanaham in the language of the Indians. Soon they saw naked people, and the admiral went ashore in the armed launch, and Martin Alonso Pinzon and his brother Vicente Inez, who was captain of the Nina. The admiral brought out the royal banner and the captain's 2 flags with the green cross, which the admiral carried on all the ships as a standard, with an F and a Y, and over each letter a crown, one on one side and the other on the other. Thus put ashore, they saw very green trees and many pines and fruits of various kinds. The admiral called to the 2 captains and to the others who had jumped ashore, and to Rodrigo d'Escobedo, the escrivano of the whole fleet, and to Rodrigo Sanchez de Segovia. And he said that they should be witnesses that, in the presence of all, he would take, as in fact he did take, possession of the said island, for the king and for the queen his lords, making the declarations that were required, and which at more length are contained in the testimonials made there in writing. Soon many people of the island gathered there. So let's go back to Dum Diversas. And I quote, we weighing all in singular the premises with due meditation, and noting that since we had formerly by other letters of ours granted among other things free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit. That goes to show you there that it wasn't just savages in these lands of quote-unquote the Americas. They had kingdoms, they had dukedoms, they had dominions and goods. As Christopher Columbus was relieved to see these goods in his journal that we just read. But let's continue. By having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the aforesaid Infante, justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed and doth possess these islands, like we just read, lands, harbors, and seas, and they do of right belong and pertain to the said King Alfonso and his successors. In a nutshell, I'm going to take all of your land and your goods and claim them for myself. I discovered them. This was called the Age of Discovery. And it worked because that was the age that the world was in. It was sealed by the elements in the sky. And more importantly, it was sealed by the Most High. He allowed it to happen for a time, right? Genesis 1:14, signs, seasons, and times. Now let's look at an account from an early settler that saw the ancient Americas. I think it's important for the climate to understand exactly how much destruction really went on. We're going to focus on Bartolome de las Casas. He was a Dominican missionary to the island of Hispaniola. The publication of his The Destruction of the Indies challenged not only the notion of forced conversion, but the enslavement of native peoples in Spain's New World colonies. His arguments for humane treatment not only involved him in debates in print with men like Juan Gines de la Sepulveda, but formed the basis for the English-created idea of the Black Legend. The Black Legend insisted that Spain was a cruel colonizing country in contrast with England policies and practices in the Atlantic world. Now we can see Spain, Rome, Italy trying to recant this, probably because of De las Casas and what we see in the world today. Let's see what De las Casas had to say about Sepulveda's thoughts. Now, if we shall have shown that among our Indians of the western and southern shores, granting that we call them barbarians and that they are barbarians, there are important kingdoms, large numbers of people who live settled lives in a society, great cities, kings, judges, and laws, persons who engage in commerce, buying, selling, lending, and the other contracts of the law of nations. Will it not stand proved that the Reverend Dr. Sepulveda has spoken wrongly and viciously against people like these, either out of malice or ignorance of Aristotle's teaching, and therefore has falsely and perhaps irreparably slandered them before the entire world? I don't know about you, but that sounds like a particular people that's on the planet right now, constantly being slandered in front of the entire world. From the fact that the Indians are barbarians, it does not necessarily follow that they are incapable of government and have to be ruled by others, except to be taught about the Catholic faith and to be admitted to the holy sacraments. They are not ignorant, inhumane, or bestial. Rather, long before they had heard the word Spaniard, they had properly organized states, wisely ordered by excellent laws, religion, and custom. They cultivated friendship and bound together in common fellowship, lived in populous cities in which they wisely administered the affairs of both peace and war, justly and equitably, truly governed by laws that at very many points surpassed ours, and could have won the admiration of the sages of Athens. Well, it sounds like they had it together to me, and I'd probably take his word for it since he was here during that time. So De La Casa had some pretty choice words for what he saw. He spoke about civilized and populous cities, laws and judges and lawyers, and a complete civilization that was already here. So it's very interesting when we're in school hearing about these savages when that was a blatant lie. And we're getting this information firsthand. So why? What's the purpose, right? What is the reasoning for distorting history, hiding history, and just completely lying about everything? Why is the Pope now coming out in 2023 trying to separate itself from this specific age? And the reason why, as we spoke before, is judgment. The very people this happened to aren't who you think they are. I'm pretty sure you've heard this already, and we'll dive into that at another time. But I just wanted to show you this age, and we're going to touch on a few ages within the next week or two, because it's very important to the times that we're in. The next age we'll touch on is the age of enlightenment. This is the time when man decided to put God to the side and revert to science. And I will show you how this was a weapon used against you, me, everybody on the planet immediately after the age of discovery. A strategic plan, right? But it was all written in the stars, and it's all for a purpose. We are just going to stick on the ages that concern the Americas, because these are the most vital ones in the times that we're living in right now. This is why you're seeing the destruction of this nation from the seams, from its foundation, from the inception of it, because of these wicked ages. But it was all for a purpose, and it was all designed by your Creator. Stay tuned for more. Shalom.